Hello friends, welcome to this episode of SelfKind with me, Erica Webb. I want to talk today about something that a friend said to me the other day, which was around how she knows that if I am not available for something that I'm invited to, that I will just say no. And she will know that I say that and I'm not just kind of going along with things just because she's asked me. And it occurs to me that this is often a really hard thing for highly sensitive people to do. So I thought it might be a really worthwhile thing to have a quick chat about. I just wanted to have a quick chat today, really, on this episode about this conversation that I had with my friend. And she had invited me out for dinner. And she's also a highly sensitive person. And she said to me, I know I don't have to apologize for asking with you because I know that you will say no if you're not available or you don't want to, right? And she said, I would love to know how you do that. And it was a really interesting question because I almost don't know how I got there, and I know for certain that I've not always been like that because I was a serious people pleaser, and there was no real clear moment where that changed. But on reflection, I think there's a few things that I have learned that have helped me get to that point where it's like I say no when I want to say no, that I think could be really helpful to share. I think that this is particularly challenging for highly sensitive people because we know when someone's disappointed. We know when someone is mad. We know when someone is upset. We can pick up on the visual clues really easily. But if we are also really deeply empathetic, and we all are, but some highly sensitive people are also very empathic and can almost feel the emotions of others, which is not a woo-woo thing. It's actually a thing that happens in the brain. So just a side note, it can sound very woo-woo, but anyway, that is not what this conversation is about. But if you are a very empath type HSP, then you might actually feel the feelings in your body. And so in order to avoid the, oh gosh, I can see that I've disappointed that person, we will just say yes when we actually mean no. And so here's a few things that I know about how I've gotten to a place where I now mostly can say no if I mean no. And as a side note to that, I don't do it all of the time, right? There are certain times it could be that I'm just depleted and I have a really hard time saying no when I mean no. Certain relationships, that's harder. So I think it's important to point out that it's not all or nothing. And that can be one of the best sort of tips that I can offer you, is that there will be certain relationships where saying no and being that was really hard is easier than in others. And so be curious about that. What relationships are kind of safe enough for you to practice your no when you mean it, right? You don't just start saying no because you want to just practice your no. But if you're I really don't want to do that, but I can feel myself really wanting to say yes to please them, then it might be an interesting space to be okay, well, I'm going to practice my no because I feel safe with this person. I trust this person. Maybe you even explain to them, it's really hard for me to do this because what I want to do is please you, but I actually don't have the capacity for that. And so I'm going to say no. And that is hard for me, but I'm doing it anyway. So that's, I guess, my first tip. And I think that when I look back and try to trace my way forward or track my way forward to where I'm at now, I think the biggest thing for me was a recognition, and I'm not sure that it was a conscious light bulb moment, but on reflection, a recognition that either way, someone's going to be uncomfortable. So when we say yes and we mean no, we are uncomfortable. When we say no and the other person wanted us to say yes, they are uncomfortable. And maybe we are too because we are aware of the fact that we've upset them. But for me, it was this recognition of two things. One, someone's uncomfortable, right? And it's interesting that I feel more okay with being the uncomfortable one, which is very common for HSPs, right? It's well, I can handle my own discomfort, but I cannot handle it if you're mad at me. But also realizing that if I'm willing to take responsibility for my emotions as an adult, I need to give other people that same level of responsibility back and respect, essentially, right? It's I believe that as a fellow adult, you are responsible for managing your emotions, right? You are responsible for managing your disappointment. If my no disappoints you, that's actually not my burden. And to say that can sound a little bit cold, and it doesn't mean we turn into cold, hard, awful, non-empathetic, robotic people. Not at all. We can be still very loving, very kind, very empathetic, and still give our no when it's a no. And I think that's the key. It's saying, I'm actually not responsible for managing and micromanaging somebody else's emotions, which is what we're trying to do, right? We are trying to kind of like a chess master, control all the pieces on the board. And it's like, well, if I go left and they go right, everything's fine. But if I go left and they go back, it's all over. It's exhausting because we're trying to predict and micromanage and twist ourselves into knots in order to avoid the discomfort of their discomfort and the discomfort that we have as a result of their discomfort. So I think that that's the key thing. It's like each adult has the responsibility for their own emotions. We do co-regulate with people, right? Which is why I think that this can be tricky sometimes, is because we know that connection with other people is really important for our own emotional regulation, but it still doesn't make you responsible for somebody else's feelings, right? There's a very big difference to recognizing that you have an impact, and we all have an impact when we're, in relationship with each other. We have an impact on how each other's feeling, for sure. There's no way to avoid that. But that's very different to assuming that you must take responsibility. And of course, there's going to be somewhere there's somewhere in my brain, and there might be somewhere in your brain too, that says, well, is that an excuse then for being unkind? And no, we have to not look at this as an absolute. It is, there's so very few things in life that are absolutes, but we look through an absolute lens because our brain likes the certainty of rules and structure and predictability. And so anytime that we can practice the art of holding two simultaneously truthful things that somehow seem at odds with each other, the better. I'm trying to think if there's anything else, but I think that's really the main things. And then for me, with anything that I'm kind of teaching or communicating or offering through this podcast or in my work with one-on-one clients, we have to build evidence for our brain to get more comfortable with doing a new thing. Because the thing is that when you are a highly sensitive person who has navigated a really good part of your life by people pleasing or by saying yes when you mean no, your brain has a lot of evidence that that strategy keeps you safe. It keeps you included in your community. It, keeps you loved. It keeps you accepted. It keeps things calm, whatever the case may be. You have a lot of evidence for that in your past. And so, of course, when you go to do something different, your brain's going to be like, this is a bad idea. Why would you change the plan? This is the plan that keeps us safe. So we have to have a way of meeting that and being like, okay, yes, I get that this is the way that we've always done things. And so this seems like the safest route. But I'm also really committed to my own needs. And in order to serve those, I'm going to have to do something that's uncomfortable. And that uncomfortable thing is saying no instead of yes, and owning that. And so I think it can be very helpful to think about it through that lens. We have a pool of evidence, and it's a very deep pool of all the times that we've done that and it's worked in our favor in some way, shape, or form. And now it's like, we're going to do this thing, and there's no evidence yet that that's a good idea. We have a thought that it might be. We kind of want something that's on the other side of it, but there's no evidence for our brain to pull from. And so it says, what are you doing? Are you mad? That's a terrible idea. And so we have to be able to meet ourselves compassionately and say, yeah, I get that this is hard. This is hard because it's a hard thing, but I'm going to do it anyway because I'm really committed to what's on the other side of that. And I guess that's the final piece. And, no absolutes. So maybe there's more pieces that I'll come up with later and do another episode on. But in terms of the way that I'm thinking about it right now, that might be the final piece, is like, what are you most committed to? Keeping the peace and managing other people's emotions, or navigating your inner world, your well-being, and what it is that you need in order to feel the way that you want to feel. And as a highly sensitive person, some of the things, I guess, that get disrupted when we say yes but we mean no is the solitude that we might need, the downtime that we might need, the types of activities that we might prefer that kind of fill our cup in a way that maybe non-highly sensitive people, it's just not the same. But we also lose a level of self-trust because we know what we want and we don't do it. So to me, I think that was probably one of the bigger pieces of this puzzle for me, was caring enough about myself that I said, it matters so much to me that I am respectful of myself. And that is more important to me than avoiding the discomfort of saying no. And I didn't get there in one fell swoop. It wasn't like I went to bed one night, got up the next morning and was like, cool, saying no's easy. I still find it hard to say no sometimes. And I still say yes sometimes and later realize that I meant no. We're not looking to be perfect. We're not looking to be perfect at any of this stuff. If perfection and getting it right every time is your goal, you will always be disappointed, because you, at the end of the day, are still human, and humans are fallible. We will continue to make mistakes despite our best efforts. So don't make perfection the goal. We can, certainly strive to do better all the time. Of course we can if we do it with kindness. But if perfection is the goal, it's exhausting. So drop the perfectionism. All right, I think that's it for this episode. I thank you for joining me. If you have questions about that, if you've got anything that you want to share, I absolutely adore hearing from you, so please feel free. It's been a really long time since I've asked for ratings and reviews on the podcast, but I would absolutely love it if you would take the 30 seconds that it would take to just leave a rating and a review. If you're on YouTube, I don't think it works like that, so just subscribe. That's the thing that helps. Share it with somebody. If you're on Spotify or Apple, I think there's a way to rate. There definitely is over on Apple, but it would make such a difference to me. So thank you in advance for taking a little bit of time to do that. All right, friends, until next time, keep being kind to yourselves, and I'll talk to you again really soon.